you'll do all right. So anyway, so I came to Bristol and started studying philosophy, which I quite enjoyed, and I was, fine at it. But it soon became clear that actually there wasn't, I wasn't going to find what I was looking for through studying philosophy, not least because there wasn't a coherent worldview that everybody was saying, yes, this is where we got to after our kind of 2,500 years of philosophical investigations. It clearly wasn't going to be found there, although there were some interesting issues and some interesting stuff along the way. For me, the main thing about when I came to Bristol, there was this little chapel where up on the Downs, in the middle of one of the halls of residence, where in those days there were kind of students from different church backgrounds who were meeting, and it was back in the late 1970s, and there was a lot of kind of Holy Spirit stuff going on there.
And how did you understand that at that time? Because obviously, although you believed in God, probably if it was a traditional Church of England school, they wouldn't have really talked much about that kind of thing. So
no.
How did you react to all of that when you started seeing stuff happen?
I was very moved by it. I went in, and basically what I saw people worshipping God. I'd never seen that before.
Right.
In fact, I remember as a child, somebody, because my dad was a vicar and stuff, and somebody saying to me, somebody asking somebody else, that's right, where do you worship? And I remember sort of being very surprised at that question. Worship. Because you have this sort of picture of what worship is like, and that worship certainly wasn't kind of really, I would have said, as I would think of it, wasn't really part of kind of what used to go on very much. But this was a very wholehearted engagement with God. Certainly on the face of it, here are people who are really engaging with God, where God was somehow powerfully present, and there was a real sort of engagement going on, and I felt it was lovely. It was really, really good, and I felt very distant from it, and I felt very moved by it. I was glad I was there, and I was, I was powerfully challenged by it, and I found myself thinking clearly, here are people who are engaging in something which for them certainly comes very close to addressing, the kinds of issues that I was very sort of preoccupied by in those days. But obviously there's the whole authenticity thing. You can't just say, okay, I'll believe that, or okay, I'll join in, and you can't it's not like that. And I didn't know how, if it was true, if what was going on was real and authentic, then yes, I would want that. But I didn't know how I was going to get from me to them, particularly that, in sort of conversations and things, there were issues and difficulties in terms of, sort of doctrines and this and that and the other that I found a bit sort of difficult or couldn't be explained properly, or whatever. And so I couldn't really see how that gap was going to be bridged. So that was a bit of an issue. And in a sense, I didn't want to set out to bridge it, until I wanted to be real and authentic. That's what I'd really been holding out for. I mean, I have to say that my and it was really my third year that the things really got going. And I have to say, my time in Bristol until then was probably not overall for me personally. I mean, on the outside it was fine, but actually on the inside it was very difficult time. It was a very bleak time, having, as it were, decided to sort of spike my guns and turn your engine off. It means I really had no sense of kind of who I was, or any sense of identity or future or this or that. And it was a very, very bleak time. I always remember sort of, reading about Charles Dickens when he was about 12 or something. He was suddenly put into this blacking factory. And the prospect of the rest of his life just being spent at a place like this was very traumatic for him. And in his subsequent, and he was rescued. I think an uncle or someone came and took him out and put him into a school, and then he was fine from there, and obviously became a famous writer, I think. But that was one time in his life he could never even mention it.
Right, it was just too emotionally charged and difficult. Yeah. And
I think for me, that time leading up to that, those first years had that feel for me personally. Not if I did talk about them, everyone would say, "Oh, what's the big deal?" It was but it was. Yeah. It was very bleak and hard. Not that I would have chosen it to be any other way, because it was part of the journey, if you like. But it was a very hard and bleak time.
It's quite surprising that you share about it in that way, because I remember when I was a teenager, my journey was obviously very different to yours.
Yeah.
But I remember I don't know if I'd call it angst, but going through it and somehow resolving things as I went along. Maybe it's just a temperament thing, because I am still quite an optimistic sort of person. I'm still a half glass full person by nature, and I suppose in a way that can carry you through those moments. Whereas it seems to me you were much more of a realist in a way.
No, I would say the opposite. You see, I would say that what I was doing was profoundly optimistic. Because basically, I
don't understand that.
Well, because what I decided to do was I'd really, as it were, launched myself off the edge of an abyss.
Right. In the hope that you'd find something.
Because I was convinced that there was that you know, because I was so sure that there was something.
Right.
So.
When you were willing to risk.
Yes.
There being nothing.
That's right. That's right.
Because nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Because also, what I was leaving behind had no value for me.
Right. Anyway.
That's the point. So, to launching myself out, what was there to lose? And there was an awful lot to gain, because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what it was to be human.
Right.
And I needed to find that.
Now, I'm going to ask you something that I don't know if you got the answer to this, and I don't really know the answer. But it seems to me a very thin line between what you're expressing and somebody who completely goes off the rails. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There seems to be this very, very thin line, a very thin piece of paper.
I know. Which is why.
Do you know what I mean?
Which is why I'm keen to say I'm not advocating anybody to doing, and I'm just telling my story.
But it's fascinating that you didn't kind of go completely off the edge in a way. Do you know what I mean?
I think I set myself boundaries.
Right.
I mean, because obviously, you know, in those environments you have certain things that are offered to you, and this and that and the other. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to go down any one-way streets.
Okay. How did you define that, though?
Well, for instance, issues of drugs and things.
Right.
You know.
You decided that actually they were kind of a form of escapism, or what?
It wasn't. It was a form of escapism. It was just that, you know, because I'm also by nature as a person, I get quite drawn into things quite easily.
And you thought you would actually
and I'm aware that so with drugs,
it's one-way street.
Either you like it or you don't like it. If you don't like it, you've had a bad time. If you like it, you'll try it again, and so it goes on. And so there were you know, in terms of, and I was quite, I was quite sort of disciplined with myself about what I would and wouldn't do.
Right, because you knew yourself well enough to know what the outcomes would be.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. And I didn't, and I wanted this to end in success, not in failure. I wanted, you know, this wasn't a despair. This was actually because I was so focused on finding out what it is to be human and getting into the good of it.
Yeah.
And so the idea of going down a route that would actually really make that irrelevant or impossible was something I just didn't want to do.
Yeah, sure.